Camera on.
Good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, November 21st, 2017 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll call roll. Commissioner Anderson.
Present.
Commissioner Armstrong. Commissioner Bowie. Commissioner Crane. Commissioner Fizer.
Present.
Commissioner Meiske.
Present.
Commissioner Urquia.
Present.
Hope I got that right. Mayor Turnbow.
Here.
And Commissioner Faulkner is present. We do have a quorum. No personal appearances scheduled this evening. 2 items on the consent agenda: acceptance of minutes from our October 3rd, 2017 meeting, and case 17031, Westbrook at Creekmore, 13th final plat. And unless there are any concerns or comments about either of those items, I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Anderson.
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Meiske to accept consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 6 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. And that would take us into old business. There are no cases scheduled this evening under old business. And a bit of a surprise to me, we'll go into new business, and our first item this evening is election of officers. And thank you for remembering that, Mr. Carteret. I guess it's amazing how fast a year flies by. Mr. Zur, you'll keep me honest. I will try. That's a good thing. So in the past, I know some years I think we've accepted individual nominations. Some years there's been a motion to re-elect the current slate of officers. It's at the pleasure of the commission.
Mr. Chair, just as a reminder, what offices are we filling besides chair and vice chair?
So per our bylaws, I believe, which I haven't studied for a while, we have chair and vice chair, currently Commissioner Fizer, and secretary, who is Commissioner Crane. And actually, just to clarify a little bit, the role of the secretary is to sign plats and sign official documents on behalf of the commission. Mr. Carteret?
Yeah, that is correct, sir. And typically, it's something that needs to be done during the daytime for them to come in to be able to sign the plat for us. So availability in the daytime is important in that role.
It's very handy to have someone who's otherwise retired
Yes.
in that job, and Commissioner Crane has done quite a nice job for several years. I feel a little guilty if I nominate him in his absence. He can't defend himself, but I suppose would be no harm in doing that. Our recording secretary, by the way, is, I don't know, Mr. Carteret or Mr. Grass, but you know, fortunately the job of secretary is not exactly the same as it might always be perceived. And as always, we appreciate the fine work that you do on capturing the minutes. And by the way, I probably forgot to admonish the commission this evening, but be sure that your microphone is lighted, push the button, get a green light, and speak into the microphone for the record, because it does make the job of capturing the minutes considerably easier for Mr. Carteret and Mr. Grass. Okay, So we are still on election of officers. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Anderson.
I'll make a motion to keep the existing officers, that being Commissioner Faulkner as the chair, Commissioner Crane, and Commissioner, I forget your last name.
Pfizer.
Commissioner Pfizer as vice chair.
Second by Mayor
Second.
Turnbow.
Yes.
Okay, so that was a motion by Commissioner Anderson, second by Mayor Turnbow, to retain the existing slate of officers. That sound legally sufficient? All right, and is there any discussion on the motion before we vote on it? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to retain the current slate of officers, raise a hand, please. You can only count once. And I have 6 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. So, sorry you're stuck with me for a while more. I will try to behave, Mr. Zer. And that moves us on to the 3 other cases under new business this evening. Each of these cases will require a public hearing. And let's see, I believe City is actually the applicant for all 3 of these cases. Is that correct? So the first case this evening, case 17029, rezoning of Cumberland Plaza, lots 1 through 4, rezoning from C1 neighborhood commercial to C2 general commercial. And as applicant, Mr. Carteret or Mr. Gress, would you please present the case to the commission?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Before we get started, I'd like to take a step back and just go over kind of the background for cases 17029 and 17030. The 2 of those are technically being presented as a pair. Earlier last month, staff began the process of going through the official zoning map for the city of Raymore and identified a couple inconsistencies within that map. So we decided to move forward with 2 city-initiated zoning requests this year, which are before you this evening. So I just wanted to kind of back up and give you kind of a background, like I said, of kind of the process that we were going through. So the first one this evening is case 17029, rezoning of Cumberland Plaza, lots 1 through 4, from the existing C1 zoning to C2 general commercial district. So if you direct your attention to page 1 of the staff report, you can see that there are 3 separate owners of these 4 lots. With Mrs. Carmen Carter owning Lot 1, Frank Farrow Trust owning Lots 2 and 4 of Cumberland Plaza, and then West Central Community Action Agency are the current owners of Lot 3 of that development. And the applicant, City of Raymore, we are requesting to rezone those 4 parcels of land totaling about 2.9 acres from the existing C1 neighborhood commercial neighborhood commercial district to C2 general commercial district. And as you can see, based on the map, those properties are located at the northeast and northwest corners of Highway 58 and Adams Street. In the Cumberland Plaza area. I've included 4 different pictures of each of those sites individually, so you can see the addresses that are associated with them and kind of what those buildings look like. I will note that all 3 of those property owners have been notified of the request and are all on board with what the city is trying to do here and cleaning up that area as far as zoning is concerned. So you can see there on the zoning map, the existing zoning of those 4 parcels is C1 neighborhood commercial district, and you also see that those 4 parcels are surrounded almost entirely by C2 general commercial district. So the intent of this, like I said, is just to clean that area up and make it all cohesive as one C2 general commercial zoning district throughout that area. The future land use map on the growth management plan classifies this area as appropriate for commercial use, so it is in line with the intentions of the growth management plan and the future land use plan for the city of Raymore. The major thoroughfare plan map classifies Walnut Street, which is Highway 58, as a major arterial, and Adams Street as a minor collector. Since tonight does require a public hearing for both of these cases, tonight's meeting was advertised the November 2nd edition of the Journal. And additional items of record for this evening are the mailed notices to adjoining property owners around those properties, the notice of publication in the Journal, the Unified Development Code, the application itself, the growth management plan, and the staff report here this evening. So to clarify again, the request is to redesignate the zoning classification of about 2.9 acres or 4 lots within the Cumberland Plaza area from the existing C1 Neighborhood Commercial District to the C2 General Commercial. If you skip down on page number 5 there, you'll see a couple previous planning actions on or near the subject property. You can see the Cumberland Plaza first and second plats were recorded with the City of Raymore on August 29th of 1997. And shortly after that, according to the staff reports, when those 4 lots were platted, they were actually originally zoned as the C2 Neighborhood Shopping District, which was the zoning classification that existed during that time frame. And as part of that final plat and site plan for the property, and I guess an overall vision, you could say, for the Cumberland Plaza area, the original developer of that area requested a downzoning from the C2 to the C1 Neighborhood Commercial District. And according to the staff report and minutes of those meetings, that request was approved on June 3rd of 1997. Staff did hold a good neighbor meeting of residents surrounding the area and residents from the community. However, no residents were in attendance for that meeting. A couple of staff comments related to the request this evening. Several of the properties in that area are currently occupied. One is actually also under construction right now, being renovated to house the West Central Community Action Agency. And I will just note that all of the uses that currently exist or either being proposed to exist do comply with or permitted uses within the C1 and C2 zoning districts. And staff has included below a table of the uses that are permitted in both the C1 and C2 zoning districts for your viewing. Staff did submit proposed findings of fact again for your consideration this evening. Moving on, staff does recommend that the commission approve this request in the fact that, you know, zoning these to the C2 zoning designation will just create a much more cohesive area for development as it continues to happen in that area, and just make for, like I said, a much more cohesive development for that area as development continues to occur. Looking forward at the schedule for this application, should the commission make a recommendation this evening, this case will move forward to City Council for first reading on December 11th and second reading on January 8th of 2018. That does conclude staff report. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Grass. Before we open the public hearing, do any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Grass? Yeah, okay. And before I open the public hearing, let me request, if you would like to speak on this case, Cumberland Plaza rezoning, once I open the public hearing, feel free to come forward to the podium. Please give us your name and address for the record, speak into the microphone, and we normally ask that you limit your conversation, your comments to 3 minutes or so. I'm not worried too much with the crowd this evening, but if you're speaking after someone else and you're in support of a position previously stated, if you'll simply note that and not reread the entire statement to us, we would appreciate that. So, having said that, let me open the public hearing on case 17029, rezoning of Cumberland Plaza. Would anyone care to speak on this case? And seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on case 17029, and the floor is open for discussion by the commission. Commissioner Anderson.
I'm glad that we're, and again, that's the district where we have a kaleidoscope of zoning there, so I'm glad we're having some type of consistency there. But just, unless I missed it, can you remind me or let me know again why the change from C1 to C2?
Mr. Grass?
Yes.
Yes.
So the city was actually approached by a prospective tenant of one of the buildings that was there, who was wanting to convert one of the buildings to a gym, which is currently not permitted in the C1 zoning district. And that has always been kind of an area that the city has seen, and obviously the commission has realized as an area that has a couple inconsistencies in the area. So the city just kind of saw that as an opportunity to clean that area up totally. And as I mentioned, and as you can see on the map, it's surrounded entirely by C2 zoning. So to have that C1 zoning kind of encapsulated by C1 zoning and encapsulated by that C2 zoning just really doesn't make for a very cohesive area for development to either happen or for tenants to keep filling in those spaces right there. So like I said, the city kind of took that as an opportunity to clean this area up as far as zoning is concerned, and just to move forward and make that area a little more cohesive for development in the future.
Okay.
And Mr. Grass, I apologize if I'm restating what you've already said, but on page 6, staff comments numbers 2 and 3, it looks like the official zoning maps flipped back and forth between C1 and C2. However, when staff dug into the ordinances, they found that there was an ordinance identifying that property as C1, and there was not an ordinance found that identified it as C2, even though the various iterations of zoning map were inconsistent. So I think one of the points here is we're trying to clear up an inconsistency that occurred over the years, and it's not the first time we've seen that, right? Yeah. Mr. Grass, did I steal your thunder? Sorry.
You're absolutely correct, sir.
Other questions, commissioners?
I have a question.
Commissioner Fizer?
On page 8, number 6, it has what some of the differences are. Are those really the biggest differences between C1 and C2 that it allows, I'm sorry, am I speaking? It allows a hotel or motel or indoor sports and recreation and indoor entertainment and spectator sports? Are those kind of the
Yes, those are the major
biggest
differences between the two. Most of the uses that are permitted in a C1 are also permitted in a C2, but those are some of the uses that are permitted in a C2 but not in a C1.
Okay, so that's kind of really the biggest
Yes.
change between the two. Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments? Brave enough to make a motion on this case?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion, please.
Commissioner Anderson?
Make a motion to accept the staff proposed findings of fact in forward case 17029, rezoning of Cumberland Plaza, first and second plats, lots 1 through 4, to City Council with a recommendation of approval.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Meiske. Okay, so we have, oh, it won't, don't worry about it. We'll spot you in a minute. But we do have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Meiske, to accept staff proposed findings of fact on case 17029, rezoning of Cumberland Plaza, first and second plats, lots 1 through 4, and forward to City Council with a recommendation of approval. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you. I have 6 in favor, and therefore none opposed and no abstentions. And Mr. Cataret, Mr. Grass, I think that'll take us directly ahead to the next case, 17030, rezoning of Good Ranch, Tract 1, Ag to C3. And this case also will require a public hearing. But first, let's have the staff report.
Thank you again, sir. Again, the second application tonight as part of the city-initiated request for rezoning is the Tract 1 of the Good Ranch development on the southwestern portion of the city of Raymore. So Tract 1 is currently zoned as an agricultural district. It is located on the northwest intersection of Dean Avenue and North Cass Parkway. And as you can see on the existing zoning map there, like I said, it is currently zoned as an agricultural district. The future land use map that is contained in the GMP identifies this area as appropriate for commercial use, so it is in line with the intentions of the growth management plan and the future land use map again. The major thoroughfare plan classifies Dean Avenue and North Cass Parkway both as minor arterial roadways. Again, since tonight does require a public hearing for this case, tonight's meeting was also advertised in the November 2nd edition of the Journal, and additional items of record include mailed notices to adjoining property owners, the notice of publication, the Unified Development Code, the application, the growth management plan, and the staff report itself. So again, the applicant, the City of Raymore, is just requesting the rezoning designation of about 9.2 acres located generally at the northwest intersection of Dean Avenue and North Cass Parkway from its existing agricultural zoning classification to C3 Regional Commercial District. If I can direct your attention to previous planning actions near the property, the MOU for the Good Ranch development was approved by the City of Raymore on March 14th of 1994. That very same agreement was amended on December 27th, 2010 to reflect the rezoning of 3 tracts of land from single-family residential to Business Park zoning district. There was another the same Good Neighbor meeting held on November 1st of this year. However, again, no residents were in attendance to that meeting. The request for rezoning is a result, actually, of the construction of North Cass Parkway. So if you look back at the zoning map on page 2 there, you can see the original design for North Cass Parkway was originally supposed to take a little bit sharper curve to the north there. So that's kind of what the existing zoning district follows, the boundary that exists today. However, as that road was designed and built, it actually shifted a little bit the alignment to the south. So after it was constructed, we were kind of left with this remnant tract of ag zoning land that we have here this evening. So in an effort to kind of clean up that area and make that an entire area zoned commercially, as it was always intended to be, the city is here to request this rezoning this evening. As I mentioned, since that area was always zoned or always intended to be zoned as commercial land, this rezoning will not require any sort of amendment to the existing MOU for the Good Ranch development. Staff again did submit proposed findings of fact for your consideration this evening. Looking ahead, this application will have the same schedule should the commission make a recommendation this evening. It'll move forward to City Council for first reading on December 11th and move forward for second reading on January 8th of 2018. Because this area was always intended to be a commercial district, staff does recommend that the commission does accept staff proposed findings of fact and forward this case to City Council with a recommendation of approval. That would conclude staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Gress. And again, before I open the commission, or open the floor to public comment, do any members of the commission have questions for Mr. Gress? All right. So, remembering what I said previously, I will now open the public hearing on case 17030, rezoning of Good Ranch Tract 1. Would anyone in the public like to come forward and speak on this case? And seeing none, I'll close that public hearing and open the floor for discussion by the commission. Questions, comments? Pretty straightforward. Okay. All right. Folks on my left, commissioners on my left, would anyone care to break the trend that we're on and make a motion on this case?
I'll give it a try.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Pfizer.
Okay. I'm not nearly as good at this as Commissioner Anderson. Well, thank you. I'll find that page.
We appreciate staff's
Yeah,
help.
Definitely. I'm just trying to figure out how you start this. What do you usually? I make a motion.
Yes.
Okay, that city staff, no, that we recommend that
Yes.
that we accept the staff proposed findings of fact and forward case 17030, rezoning of the Good Ranch Tract 1 from AG Agricultural District to C3 Regional Commercial District to the City Council with a recommendation of approval.
And I'll second that motion, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to get this, Urquia.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
I'll get this locked in a minute, and then I'll have to remember the city engineer's name. But it's good to have new blood. Okay. So, motion on the floor by Commissioner Pfizer, second by Commissioner Urquia, to accept staff proposed findings of fact on case 17030 and forward the case to City Council with the recommendation of approval. Sound legal? Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion? And seeing none, all those in favor, raise a hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 in favor. None opposed, no abstentions. And I'm sure that the next case will be quite interesting. That takes us into our last case under new business this evening, case 17033, a proposed 26th Amendment to the Unified Development Code, basically coming out of our 2017 annual review and and the discussion that we had at that time. So again, staff, if you would, Mr. Cataract or Mr. Gress, please present case 17033 to the commission.
Thank you, sir. I will start the presentation on this case, handle the first revision that we propose under this amendment, and then hand off to Mr. Gress. So the request this evening before you is what would be the 26th amendment to our Unified Development Code. This amendment stems from discussions that the commission had earlier this year as part of your annual review of the Unified Development Code back in June, and then we had a work session, a discussion at your last meeting there on October 3rd, where the results of some additional research that staff did on the three main topics we'll talk about tonight, and staff was directed to bring those three topics forward. So I'll break them down. I will start on the first topic, which is a revision proposed to Section 405-040D of the Unified Development Code. I do want to note when we amend the Development Code, does require a public hearing, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman. So we do want to enter into the record our growth management plan, the Unified Development Code, notice of publication that was published in the Journal newspaper, and the staff report submitted to you this evening. So on page 2, under staff comments, again, we're talking about 5 separate revisions to the code. The first one, that's Section 405-040D, is a proposal to clarify code language related to the keeping of animals on residential zoned property. This code language has been, it was part of the old zoning code, adopted into the Unified Development Code in 2009. What we're proposing this evening are 2 modifications to the language regarding keeping of animals. And again, this section of code really just addresses the actual use of property and keeping of animals. We have a separate animal control code for the city of Raymore, which deals more with the care and the keeping and maintenance of properties when they have animals on the property. This is really just dealing with the whether you're allowed to keep certain animals on certain lots of the city. So currently the language specifies certain animal breeds. So the language as it currently reads talks about the fact that cattle, cows, horses, sheep, goats, and similar animals are permitted in our agricultural zoning district and our rural estate zoning district. So the agricultural district requires properties to be at least 10 acres in size to have that zoning classification. The rural estate, the RE district, requires the lots to be at least 3 acres in size. So upon those, if your property has one of those 2 zoning designations, you're allowed to keep a certain number of animals on your property. What the code doesn't specify at this point in time, it doesn't address fowl or the keeping of chickens, which has become more popular, obviously, in recent years. So the first proposal that we wanted to propose this evening is simply to add that language, the fact that we are dealing with the other animals that I specified, but also chickens and similar fowl. And that would be allowed again on those properties zoned A or RE. So if you have a property with that zoning designation, you would be allowed to keep chickens and similar fowl upon your property. Again, there's limits as far as numbers. So that's the first proposal where we would add that language regarding chickens and fowl. But we'd also propose that if you have property that is zoned R1, that is at least 3 acres in size, that you would also be able to keep the chickens, fowl, and the other animals upon that property. The key there that we're proposing, even though it has the R1 designation, is it has to be 3 acres in size. We felt that because we have a number of R1 zone properties in the city that have a lot more than 3 acres in size, they certainly, if they wanted to keep animals of any kind, horses, or if they wanted to keep chickens or fowl, they could request a reclassification to the rural estate if they had the 3 acres. That would be an option. All we're saying is that don't necessarily want to force them to go through that simply for keeping these animals. If they have the 3 acres, then we feel they should be allowed to have those animals upon the property. But certainly if that part of the code is the change is not supported by the commission, we still would like to have the language, the chickens and similar fowl, be added for the A and the RE. And again, if you don't support the R1 for the 3 acres size properties, those owners could come in and request a rezoning to RE if they truly wanted to keep those animals. So we're a little bit indifferent on that particular request, but feel that for clarification, adding the chickens and similar fowl would just help in enforcement. At this time, with the proposal before you, we are not proposing or recommending that any of these animals, including chickens, be allowed on any acreage less than 3 acres in Raymore. That is not being proposed this evening. So that's really the extent of what we refer to as revision 1 this evening.
Mm-hmm.
And would you like to continue on and keep it as a whole?
I think so, but let me double check with Mr. Zer. So given that this case requires a public hearing, I'm thinking that it might become kind of unwieldy to bounce back and forth between partial staff report, partial public hearing. I kind of feel like I'd be more comfortable with hearing staff report in its entirety and then opening public hearing in its entirety. Is that fine,
I
street
think
legal?
that makes good sense, but
Okay.
you are the chair and have discretion with regard to how you receive the staff report, but it
Let's-
does make
Let's
sense.
do that. I don't want to inconvenience the public that has come to the meeting tonight, but I think just to try to make it more manageable, Mr. Cataret, if you're ready to proceed with staff report on revision 2, let's go that way.
We will certainly. Thank you, sir. And at this point, I'll have Mr. Gress finish out the staff report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So the next revision, revision number 2, and I will kind of give you a brief heads up here, that the next 3 revisions are actually kind of all tied together in their relation to one another, and the fact that they deal with accessory dwelling units within the city of Raymore. Although that's one, excuse me. Although that idea is one entire topic, in order to kind of get these revisions worked into the Unified Development Code and all the different sections, it required a revision to 3 separate sections of the Unified Development Code. So the first one here, revision number 2, is a proposal that adds definitions to clarify the proposed code language with regard to accessory dwelling units that will be presented in the next revision. So this would add 2 separate definitions to section 485.010 of the Unified Development Code, and it would just distinguish between a detached accessory dwelling unit and an attached accessory dwelling unit. And so what we've done here is kind of come up with 2 separate definitions for those, and then a diagram that sort of explain the difference between those 2. So you can see with an attached accessory dwelling unit, it's an accessory structure that's clearly attached to the existing structure that exists on the property. So that could be anything from an addition to the home, the conversion of a garage unit to a livable unit, a finished basement that might be connected to the home, but it's a separate living unit. Whereas a detached accessory dwelling unit would be something more similar to a detached garage that might have a unit above it, or a small shed type unit in the backyard that might be converted into living quarters for an older relative. Or a younger family looking to find a way to start a family here in the city of Raymore. So the first revision would just revise those definitions and provide some clarification as far as diagrams that would help clarify those definitions within a Unified Development Code.
Okay. I think that's pretty straightforward. If you wouldn't mind, let's go ahead to revision 3 then.
Absolutely. So revision 3 would clarify again those definitions, but it would modify the use table found in section 405.020H of the Unified Development Code. And it would change kind of where these different types of dwellings are permitted as far as zoning districts throughout the city of Raymore. So currently an accessory dwelling is only allowed in an agricultural, rural estate, or rural residential zoning district. As Mr. Cataret noted, those are some of our larger lot sizes within the city of Raymore. What this revision would propose would be to permit an attached accessory dwelling unit, like I said, a garage space that's converted, or a finished basement. It would propose to permit those in all residential zoning districts throughout the city. In addition, it would kind of propose to allow detached accessory dwelling units as a special use in the R1A, R1, and R1.5 zoning districts throughout the city, provided that certain design requirements and size requirements are met for those parcels.
Right. And Mr. Gress, if you would, and I'm not sure if the public can see this or not, but on our chart we have P, S, dash. I think there's also a C, but not shown on this particular revised usage chart. So if you would, clarify the distinction between a P and an S and a dash.
Absolutely. So a permitted use is anything that's permitted by right in any zoning district. So for an R1 zoning district, a single-family house would be an example of a permitted use. You can come in today, pull a permit to build that single-family house on that lot, provided that it's zoned R1. A special use would be anything where the use is permitted provided that special conditions are met. So as I mentioned, the size requirements for the lot, provided that it meets a given lot size requirement or a certain zoning district or certain design requirements are placed on there. Provided those are met, that then becomes a permitted use in that district, and you can pull a permit to build whatever structure it is you're proposing to build in that district. A conditional use would be, you know, perhaps the use isn't permitted in the district because it's you know, it's unlike all the other uses that exist in that district. There's just certain conditions that would, I guess, allow for that use to exist within that district, if that makes sense.
And I think from commission standpoint, we usually call those, well, it depends. And we look at existing surrounding uses and a specific proposed use within that application for a conditional use permit.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Please continue. I think we haven't talked about the dash yet.
So the dash there, which is found in the R2, R3, R3A, R3B, and Parks and Recreation District, that just simply means that that is not a permitted use within that district.
Right.
And there's no application or procedure that anyone can go through to make that a permitted use, other than changing the use table like we are here this evening.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Gress.
Absolutely. So that will conclude revision number 3. If there are any questions on those first 2 revisions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, I can move on to the 4th revision of this staff report.
I think unless commissioners have any questions at this time, I think the next revision 4 ties in with this, and that's probably where those special
Absolutely.
Conditions or special, what's the right word?
Conditions.
Okay. Well,
Absolutely.
special conditions are defined further in this part identified as a revision 4, so go ahead. Mr.
Yes,
Gress.
so as I mentioned in the use table there, where you see those S's for a special use, over on the far right-hand side of the table, you'll see the use standard, where you'll see section 420.050E. So this next revision number 4, deals with that section there, and basically it adds some clarification and some design and size requirements that would apply to a property owner that would come in to apply for a permit to build an accessory dwelling on their property. So staff has done a little bit of research on what surrounding communities are doing, kind of looked at what our vision is for accessory dwellings in the city of Raymore, and come up with a set of design guidelines for attached and detached accessory dwelling units within the city. So some of the revisions here that we've made are kind of distinctions between what requirements are in place for a detached accessory dwelling unit versus an attached accessory dwelling unit. Obviously, they're a little bit different in the construction and the size of those, actually. As we continue to move forward this, I'll kind of explain how the maximum sizes for those in different zoning districts and different lot sizes can be calculated, because we're simply permitting these within a zoning district doesn't mean that anybody can go out today and pull a permit to build an accessory dwelling. That's kind of what those conditions are in place to do, to kind of limit the lot sizes that they can be built on and the maximum sizes that somebody can come in and build an accessory dwelling to. So the first revision that staff has made was kind of looking at the different sizes of an accessory dwelling unit in relation to existing houses on properties, existing lot sizes throughout the city, and different zoning districts with regard to the different lot sizes within those. So if you look at section E number 4, you'll see we've added that an accessory dwelling unit, attached or detached, shall be limited to 60% of the total square footage of the existing structure, but shall not exceed 1,000 square feet. So with some of our larger lot sizes, if we were to limit that at 60%, some of those accessory dwelling units could get considerably large. So that's where that 1,000 square foot maximum kind of comes into play, to limit somebody from coming in and building a 2,000 square foot home and saying, well, we want to count this as our accessory structure now. When in reality, at that point, it's not truly subordinate to the existing use on the property. So that's where that kind of provision comes into play. If you look forward or down to provision number 8, we've kind of changed that a little bit to where either the existing dwelling unit or the accessory dwelling unit shall be occupied by the property owner at any time the accessory dwelling unit or the existing dwelling unit is occupied. So just making sure that as you're renting these out, they're not becoming a duplex on an R1 lot. That's just simply not the spirit or intent of the R1 zoning district. The spirit here is to allow a little more flexibility in either having a space available for an ailing grandmother or a grandparent who, may still want to live independently, but, might need a little bit extra support system in place to help them do that. Or, a younger family who just can't afford to buy a home here in Raymore, but they really want to remain in the community. So this would just provide a simple, a little bit cheaper option for them to start their family here in Raymore. And to add on to that, Section A of that section would require, before a certificate of occupancy can be issued for that accessory dwelling unit, the owner of that property would be required to sign an agreement stating that they will maintain occupancy of either the accessory dwelling unit or the existing structure, and that document would have to be recorded with Cass County and would stand with that property throughout its entirety of the life of that accessory dwelling unit. And that would be enforceable, through when they come in to pull the permit, we can just check, is this person the owner? Is it an LLC? There's a lot of background research that staff can do on that to make sure that the person that's pulling the permit is indeed the property owner. Looking forward, it can be addressed on a number of different ways as well to make sure that the owner of that property is living on that property as well. Looking ahead at revision number 9, a detached accessory dwelling unit shall be connected to the public water main utilizing the existing connection of the main structure. Previously, the code has been phrased to kind of force them to connect to the public water main separately from the existing connection. And we kind of took a step back and realized kind of, that really creates the appearance that what's going on in that accessory dwelling unit is separate from what's going on in the existing structure with those two separate water bills, 2 separate connections. So whoever's living in that accessory dwelling unit may not be fully dependent on what's going on in that existing structure. So we think that tying those two together and forcing them to connect into that main structure really ties that together and just reinforces the fact that what's going on and whoever's living in that accessory dwelling in the backyard is fully related and tied to what's going on in that existing structure on that lot. If you move forward to revision number 11, detached accessory dwelling units shall be connected to the sanitary sewer line or an approved septic system or similar system. And that would obviously have to be reviewed to make sure that the existing structure or the existing system can handle the expansion of 1 or 2 bedrooms. If not, they'd be required to upsize that connection or upsize the size of their existing septic system. And that would all take place during the review of the permit, the building plans, and everything that takes place during that process. Revision number 12, the accessory dwelling unit should be architecturally consistent with the design of the existing structure on the lot. This was put in place to just try and connect what's going on in that accessory structure with the existing structure on the house. So you not have people coming in and putting up a shed in their backyard and calling that an accessory dwelling. We feel really strongly that the appearance of that accessory dwelling should be strongly correlated and tied back to what's going on with that existing structure. Not only from the beautification standpoint and how it looks, but just reinforcing that those two are strongly connected on that same lot. Just because they're 2 separate structures doesn't mean they're totally separate. The last revision, number 13, would just kind of tie into the different design guidelines of this ordinance. And it just states that the entrance to an attached accessory dwelling unit, so a garage converted to a living space or a basement, the main entrance to that would have to be clearly subordinate to the main entrance to the existing house. So you don't have 2 front doors on the front of a single-family home. So that the front entrance to that accessory dwelling unit either have to be located on the side of the house or on the rear of the structure to just indicate that it's clearly subordinate to the main entrance of the existing structure. So that would kind of wrap up those 3 revisions, like I said, that tie all back to accessory dwellings in the city of Raymore. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them now, or like you said, we can hold off on them until the end.
Any immediate questions for Mr. Grass before we proceed? Okay. Let's go ahead to solar energy systems. Mr. Grass.
Thank you, sir. So revision number 5 ties back into kind of a process that the city went through early this year through the Soul Smart designation program. And to kind of recap on that, that's just a process that sort of recognizes the efforts that cities take to reduce the barriers and soft costs that residents have to go through in order to install these systems on their property. So in that process, staff kind of went back through the code and went back through a lot of the processes that a resident would have to go through in order to get that solar service on their property, and just tried to make sure that everything was aligned to make that as easy and streamlined as possible. And in doing that, staff kind of went through the code and kind of picked out a couple of revisions there that might have made the process a little bit harder than it needed to be, essentially. So I believe it was at our October 3rd meeting that staff presented a revised version of this to you all, and we were directed to make a couple more minor tweaks to that code. And really the only change that was made was the requirement for commercially zoned properties to screen the solar panels and the components that are associated with them. It was the idea of the commission that that might be a little bit too restrictive and prohibitive for commercial developments in the city of Raymore to maybe explore the possibility of solar energy for their developments. And so staff has since then taken that requirement out of the Unified Development Code. So a commercially zoned district would not be required to screen their solar panels or the components that are associated with them from view from the right-of-way. And that would conclude the staff report for the 5th revision of the UDC.
Thank you, Mr. Gress.
Oh, yes. And if you look forward, sorry to start up again, staff did propose or submit proposed findings of fact for the 26th Unified Development Code Amendment. And looking forward at the schedule of this case this evening, should the commission make a recommendation of approval or denial for this case, depending on the decision of the commission, this case will move forward to City Council for first reading on January 8th of 2018. And to City Council for second reading on January 22nd of 2018. Staff does recommend the commission accept the proposed findings of fact that were provided to you this evening and forward case 17033 26th Amendment to the Unified Development Code to the City Council with a recommendation of approval.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gress. So before I open the public hearing on case 17033, 26th Amendment to the Unified Development Code, what we've just heard from staff report, I'm going to call it 3 separate areas. It was actually broken down as staff presented it into a total of 5 revisions, 5 different areas to be revised in Unified Development Code. But for purposes of discussion, feel free to go into more detail if you want. But if you decide to speak on this case, when you come to the podium, if you would make it very clear to commission if you're speaking specifically about the changes, proposed changes to keeping of animals, or proposed changes to accessory dwelling units, or proposed changes to solar energy systems. I think that would help us to understand, and feel free to speak on all 3 of those areas. So would anyone from the public
Mr. Chair, before we move to the public hearing, yeah, could I needed to ask on the last revision thing, a little staff interaction here. Wasn't there initially proposed a section in there to prevent front-mounted, roof-mounted things for dwellings? Because I thought we talked about that being too restrictive for purposes of actually getting solar power to your home. Could you explain what revision that was made? I know we talked about commercial, but what was the other? There was another one.
Yes, absolutely, and that was brought forward at the first iteration of this, of the Unified Development Code revision. That was brought forward at the very first meeting in our very first discussion of that, and one of the commissioners suggested that staff do a little more research and look at what other communities require as far as that, which staff did, and we found that not a lot of communities out there really restrict the placement of solar panels on the roofs of residential homes. And so that revision was made at our last discussion, I believe it was on October 3rd, that revision was made to this section of the UDC. It was at that meeting that the commission suggested that we remove the additional requirement of screening for those solar panels.
Okay. I thought that had been in there originally. I just wanted to verify. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. If there aren't any more questions right at this moment, I'll open the public hearing on case 17033, proposed changes to the Unified Development Code regarding keeping of animals, accessory dwellings, and solar energy systems. Would anyone from the public like to speak on any of those aspects of this case? Okay. I don't want to cut it off too quickly, but
come on.
Please give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, Peggy and Mike Phillips, and we live 608 Lauren Lane. We've lived here for 23 years in Ward 2. And I realize this is not the issue tonight, but since we do follow pretty much what goes on in Raymore and what the city council does, and this issue has come up before about the backyard animals, we are vehemently opposed to that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I can only speak for my neighborhood, but there's really pretty much no enforcement of any ordinances where I live, okay? We currently have, and we've actually been here before and talked about neighbors with illegal signs and easements. We have, the new trend in my neighborhood is to have a porta potty in your backyard. So, and we've brought that up many times, nothing ever gets done to our city council. It's just, so my concern would be if I really thought that, I know that's not the issue tonight, but I know it has come up before, and I did read through some of the discussion about this in the last minutes and see that there, you know, there's always a group out here that wants backyard chickens specifically. I don't personally believe, in our experience with animal control, it took us 8 months to get a neighbor's dog dealt with, okay? So I can't imagine what would happen if we added that an extra burden to the animal control of having to, I don't know, chase chickens. You know, my fear would be on that nothing would be done, much like we see right now with, you know, we're still waiting for our sidewalks that were promised, how many years ago? 3. So I just, that's my great concern. I'm talking about less than 3 acres. I have no problem with more than 3 acres.
No.
As it is fine. Yes.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Ms. Phillips. Would anyone else from the public like to speak on this case?
Hi there.
Hello.
My name is Kara Entz. I live at 212 West Heritage Drive. Like them, I know this wasn't brought up tonight. I also live in a neighborhood, but we're actually 4 chickens in backyards. And if you would have asked me that 6 months ago, I would have agreed with them that that is completely insane. But my husband brought it up to me, and we have 3 young kids. So we did get chickens, baby chickens. He brought them home, and we had them inside till they were about 8 or 9 weeks old. And then, silly, we did not know you actually couldn't have chickens, because I had, I knew that Lee Summit could have it and Grandview could have it. And I grew up in Raymore and really just assumed we were a farming community, and I really just assumed we could have chickens. So my husband and I spent all summer building a really nice chicken coop for our chickens, had them in the coop for 2 weeks before we got a letter saying, you got to get rid of the chickens. However, though, because we've been in Raymore for so long, we know a lot of people, and John Berenson, who is council person for Ward 4, lives out on land, and he was gracious enough to take the chickens for us. We were kind of in a moment where we weren't sure what to do with them, but one of the reasons we became so passionate about it was because not only silly as it sounds, did they become pets? I didn't know chickens could be pets, but educational purposes too. My kids, they're young. I have 3 boys, 9, 8, and 6, and they learned so much, and it helped teach them about not just how to take care of animals, but they got to learn about chickens. We did unfortunately have to get rid of them right before they started laying eggs, but they were learning about what it was going to be like when they started laying eggs, and you know, just really teaching them about it. One of the things I would say about having chickens is if they're properly taken care of, like our other animals, cats and dogs, you know, and we don't bring roosters inside city limits, they're not that much of a burden. And I know some animals can be, but there are people out there that have dogs and cats that don't take care of them. You know, I can tell you we've got neighbors that their dogs bark till all hours of the night, but our chickens, you never heard them. I mean, the loudest they got, you still couldn't hear them from, you know, back up at the house. So we would be for chickens if you guys would think about bringing that to the city. I know Lee Summit has an urban chicken ordinance. I believe Grandview and South Kansas City also do. I'm not sure about any of the surrounding towns, like maybe in Kansas, but I believe most cities around here do have urban chicken ordinances, and we would love to have that here in Raymore as well.
Yeah, thank you for your time, for your comments. You've brought back some memories, Mr. Zur. In the interest of full disclosure, it was obviously many, many years ago, but I had a pet chicken and a pet duck as a pair one Easter and lived in a town with a population of about the same as Raymore today. So it's obviously been quite some time ago, but your comments brought back some memories. Please come forward to the podium and give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name's Susan Dooley. I live at 606 Condor in Raymore. 3 years ago, I got chickens. We moved to Raymore, and I looked at the code. It didn't specifically specify no fowl or chickens. So we went ahead and got 4 little chickens, raised them, had them a few months, and were written up for it. So we brought it up to the council, and we went through the motions, and we did have to give them up. But at the time, I made a presentation to the council telling them all the benefits of having chickens, how much my grandchildren love them, how much we love them, how much we wanted to raise our own food if we could. And I also pointed out that Lee Summit had ordinances in place. And I had spoken to Rodney Wagner, who was in charge of animal control then and still is. And he had told me at the time, 3 years ago, that they didn't get more than 5 or 10 calls per year on their chickens. And most of them were just maybe because a chicken was running loose. And so the animal control guys, he said something about a bunch of big guys running around trying to catch a chicken. Otherwise, he said, in the past 3 years since I spoke with him, that they've made it a point to have open communication with their owners of chickens. They made sure that they complied with every single specification on the ordinances regarding what the enclosures are made of, how big they can be, how far away from other residents they should be, how clean they have to be, and obviously no roosters, just hens, and their limit is 6 chickens. They said in the last 4 years, he's had no problems at all. He's had 3 or 4 complaints in the last 3 years. And there's only 1 court case in all that time, and it was a woman who insisted on having roosters and wouldn't give them up. I have copies of the ordinances if anybody's interested in looking at them, but my family and I are definitely for chickens. We think a responsible owner will do great with them. And I also think it'd be attractive to people, say, coming from Leawood or suburbs that don't allow chickens, people who really want to kind of get back to growing their own food or seeing where their stuff comes from and not having hormones and all that other stuff in them. Not that we're going to eat them, but we do eat the eggs. And I'm sorry you didn't get to see them lay eggs, but they go through puberty and they're so cute. They, isn't that nice? But we are definitely in favor of chickens, and we hope you'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to speak to us this evening. And obviously, we've hit our favorite nerve. One of them, yes. Would anyone else like to speak? Please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name is Melody Wu, W-O-O. I live at 801 South Franklin. And first, I just want to stand up for the animal control because I had good experiences with them. I have no doubt that if we did allow chickens, that they would be able to handle that, if they can handle the dogs and the very few cats that I actually see here. It's very odd. There are not very many cats, I don't think. Compared to where I grew up, there are not very many cats running around town. So
we keep the cats indoors, by the way.
Yes, I know. It's more like a unicorn sighting around here, so it's nice. And as far as code enforcement goes, anything I've ever reported has always been resolved within 2 weeks. Again, I don't feel like chickens would be a problem for our code enforcement either. Now that being said, I'm also for chickens. I am not even convinced that I want to have chickens, but I would like the option to have chickens. I would like my neighbors to have chickens because I would like to help them eat the eggs that are grown in our own backyards. And again, I do think it's important for other potential residents looking to move to Raymore that it would be something they would be interested in. like as has been stated, there's several cities around this town that do allow it. I believe even Harrisonville does. So it would be nice. And I appreciate the greater than 3 acre lot requirement. However, if you look at the percentage of lots that leaves in the city of Raymore, that's a pretty small percentage of people that are allowed that opportunity. And I was going to ask if we were aware of any of these neighboring cities having a lot of issues, but that kind of got answered before I got up here. So that's all I have.
Yeah.
Oh, also, and it seems like if we do approve having granny pods in our backyards, that chickens should also be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you for that interesting observation. Hadn't thought of it that way. Would anyone else from the public like to speak on the case 17033 this evening? All right. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on the case and open the floor for discussion by the commission. Those of us that have been on commission for a while have some fond or not so fond memories of controversial subjects, and it's amazing how the legend of the urban chicken has prevailed in that. So I'll ask if other commissioners wish to speak first before I accidentally get on a roll here.
Chairman, I do have a question.
Commissioner Urquia.
On point 3, it does kind of specify the number of animals you can have for the various types that are out there. I noticed that there's not a specification on the chickens. I know it does say that for animals not enumerated, that it's based on size, but is there anywhere where one would know what that limit is based on the size of property that they own?
Mr. Catteret or Mr. Grass, please.
You're correct. It wasn't specifically brought out in where we had under number 3, the limits per acre. There certainly are some common standards that are utilized. Many of the ordinances that were referenced tonight would include such numbers. If we would move forward on anything under 3 acres, we would certainly want to have that kind of requirement placed in there. We haven't done that detailed research yet. It would need to be added if we were to go with something allowing under 3 acres. 3 acres or more, didn't feel quite as concerned, although we would still be able to look towards some of the national publications that have that, what's reasonable acreage to have for each animal. That's what we would refer to for fowl if we had to.
Right, and I might note a little bit of background. Mr. Catteret, please feel free to jump in here. I honestly don't remember how many years ago we first began the discussion of urban chickens in particular. I sort of remember that it may have come up in City Council and they referred it to us for further study. It's been quite a while, and it always seems to be a rather controversial topic based on people's individual experiences. So I will say, from the standpoint of the proposed change tonight to the Unified Development Code, I think when Commission gave staff guidance several months ago, whenever that originally was, we were trying to be fairly conservative, fairly cautious. We were trying actually to make an incremental change, and on that keeping of animals paragraph, as Mr. Catteret pointed out earlier, one of the changes was to include R1 greater than 3 acres in addition to rural estate, which by definition is 3 acres minimum, and the other change was to address chicken and similar fowl in addition to the other animals. So this was, I think at least I saw it as an incremental change. We weren't quite bold enough or comfortable enough to take a large step and allow keeping of chicken in all residential districts, for instance. I think we were in some regard maybe testing the water here and saying, well, you know, this hopefully was going to be a little less controversial on the 3-acre minimum lots that also allowed cattle, cows, horses, sheep, and goats. So, Mr. Carteret, anything to add to my recollection?
Yeah, you are correct. I think the initial discussion would have been when we were talking through the UDC back in 2008. So this was one of the items that we clarified some language on at that time. And then as Mrs. Dooley indicated in her comments, the issue was brought back to the council, back to the planning commission a few years ago, which is the most recent discussion we had. So we've had a couple of discussions through P&Z, over the last 8 years on the topic. This we brought forward again. Another comment that Mrs. Dooley made was the ordinance didn't have that clarification. We didn't spell out chickens or other fowl.
Right.
So we felt it was time. We were coming, it was time to bring that forward just for clarification purposes. So there wasn't any question. And the same with, as you mentioned, the R1 3-acre. We just thought that was fair. If you have 3 acres, then you should be allowed to have the keeping of not only chickens, but other animals.
Well, and frankly, I think I've said in previous discussion that makes perfectly good sense to me. There were a lot of existing R1 tracts greater than 3 acres before we established the RE zoning. And I don't really feel like we should necessarily force an owner of such property to have to go through the additional process of requesting rezoning. In this instance. The other thing, and I want to reiterate because this is important to my thinking on the case, but Mr. Carteret, you mentioned, and I'd kind of like to reiterate that there are other sections of city code beyond the Unified Development Code involving nuisance and other sections that involve keeping of animals, and this does not change those sections of code. They remain in force. Mr. Zur, if you had anything else to add, feel free. Okay. So it's as I said, I don't perceive this as a radical change. I see this particular proposal as an incremental change, and I'd welcome other commissioners' opinions.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you for asking all of my questions. I appreciate
Oh, no. I hate it when I do that.
There's one outstanding question. I guess a question that I heard from the public regarding the amount of calls regarding chickens and fowls. Do we have those numbers for the city?
We don't have specific numbers. I can say it's been very limited on both sides. A couple of instances you heard tonight were enforcement issues where we had discussions with owners. But beyond that, we have, over the last 3 to 4 years, we've had more calls from individuals asking if they could keep chickens on the smaller lots. But, a handful at most over the years. And only recently, because of the discussion this evening, we received a couple of calls with residents that had concerns on allowing them on smaller lots. But it's honestly, it's been very quiet, I would say, overall on the topic. Those residents that have called ahead, they want to have chickens, and then they realize they can't have them. And unfortunately, a couple of cases where they weren't, that spoke this evening, that weren't aware of the code. But beyond that, it's been very limited discussion by the public that I've heard.
Yeah, and I asked that question because we've had lengthy discussions regarding urban chickens, which is very new to me, and I'm probably on the side of we're a growing city, and do we want to have that in the city? But I think hearing from the audience and specifically my question I asked is, has it been a nuisance? Some people like the character of the community, and I do not. I kind of cringe when I hear that we were trying to compare our city to at least Summit or other city here. I think we stand on our own merits and our own character. So I'm kind of changing my viewpoint in terms of if there's not a public outcry in terms of having chickens, in terms of any kind of complaints, there are ordinances in places. If there's anything loud, similar to other pets there, but what exactly are we doing if, starting at a 3-acre minimum to do that? So,
Yeah, I
just
think
a
it's
thought.
rather conservative, and I really appreciated the public comment.
It says a lot, yeah.
It kind of reflects my thinking. I'm not necessarily planning to rush out and get chickens. On the other hand, I'd like to be able to do that if,
Black Friday is coming up.
oh, hey, but, yeah, darn it, Orscheln's gone. Orscheln had the baby chicks and things, and oh my gosh, I missed that store. But, I'm not planning to go out and I've got plenty of stuff to manage now without trying to figure out how to raise chickens, plus the cat probably would like them way too well. But by the same token, I'd like to be able to do that, and I certainly don't feel compelled to try to tell all of the other 20,000 plus residents of Raymore how they should run their households and run their lives. I will note one other thing, and I've lived either directly adjacent to Raymore or in Raymore since 1978, so I remember Raymore when it was considerably smaller and actually a lot more casual. As we have grown, one of the prices that comes along with that growth is we have a lot more people and a lot more subdivisions with many houses, and it would be wonderful if we all had the same good common sense and would agree all the time. Unfortunately, of course, viva la diversity, and we all see things differently, and so city does have an obligation to protect the rights of all of the citizens in Raymore. It's a delicate balance.
One last question.
Sure.
So, Mr. Carteret, walk me through if we want to strike something and potentially add something at this stage. What do we have to do? Or Mr. Zur, who wants to tackle that?
I'll start the answer. I'm sure Mr. Zur could add to it as well. You simply, in your recommendation, spell out that section if you would. And you reference it by revision number if you want. Reference out any proposed language change is what you would do at that point. If that motion passed, and when the recommendation goes to City Council, it would be reflected in the ordinance that goes to City Council that that's what you're recommending. So your change would be reflected in that ordinance being presented to them. So just spell it out if you would in detail at that when you make the motion.
Fair, thank you.
Yeah, but remember, you're out of motions. All other motions this evening have to come from my left.
That's true.
I would simply make sure to note that any proposed change would also have a motion and a second to go along with it, and then you as a group would vote on that proposed change. And
Well,
then it
you're
gets
talking about an amendment to a motion. I think, what I was understanding was Commissioner Anderson was actually talking about how would we make a motion with a change built in, but either way, good advice, thank you.
And kind of on that note, if we're not necessarily wanting to change the verbiage, but maybe revisit this, say in 12 months or 18 months to kind of come back and say, now that we've made this change, what impact has that had? And could we look at expanding that?
Absolutely, yes. At
Annual
any point in
review.
time, a commissioner could bring forward a request for staff to do research. We could look at what other communities are doing, what's allowed, numbers, whatever direction you would want or research you would want, we would do. And any commission can bring that up at any meeting.
Right, but we do, and recently had an annual review of Unified Development Code, which I think was actually what triggered this case this evening.
Yes.
We started the discussion, and please remind me, I think we had some changes which have already been enacted, and we deferred several sections which were a little bit more difficult, being these three, and we deferred them back to staff for further research and
Perfect. I know.
lucky.
New guy
lucky
question.
you-
New guy
lucky
question.
you
I'm
that are
sorry.
here tonight, yes.
I like that better. It's probably easier.
Other questions from commission? I would note, I'm probably jumping the gun here, but Mr. Zur, I'm sure would remind me, in order to send a case on to city council with a recommendation, either approval or denial, it requires a majority of full commission. So that would require 5 votes minimum, one way or the other, to send a recommendation to City Council. Lacking that, we're basically, is the word stymied? I don't know, but we're basically at an impasse, and the case could go to City Council with no recommendation of commission. So, we try to avoid that. Mayor Turnbow.
Mr.
sorry.
Chair, yeah, with the knowledge that amendments can be made to my motion, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion at this time that we accept the staff proposed findings of fact and forward case number 17033, 26th Amendment of the UDC to the City Council with a recommendation of approval.
I'll second that motion.
So motion by Mayor Turnbow, second by Commissioner Urquia, to accept staff proposed findings of fact on case 17033, 26th Amendment to the Unified Development Code, and forward to City Council with a recommendation of approval. And now the floor is open for additional questions, discussion on that motion, and of course, if anyone wishes to propose an amendment to the motion, this is the time to do that.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Anderson.
I move that we accept said or amend the motion as stated, excluding revision 1.
Okay, I got to be very clear on this. So revision 1 is the entire section addressing keeping of animals. So
Reason being, and we can always come back and discuss
Okay.
at a later date.
So proposed amendment to remove revision 1 from the case.
Yeah,
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'm waiting.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, was that Mayor Turnbow?
Yes, I'll second
Thank
that.
you. Okay, we have a motion to amend by Commissioner Anderson, second by Mayor Turnbow.
Accepted by Mayor Turnbow.
I'm sorry, second, I'm not sure, how did I say that? Okay.
He accepted the amendment to his original motion.
Yeah, okay. So I think,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Zer-
I think he
actually did
I think he
second the
indicated that he
motion to
seconded
amend.
the motion to amend. So
But
you've
if
got a
it
motion
either
and a
way
second
would
to
work.
amend.
Yeah.
Well, I would be willing to accept a vote on that particular amendment of the motion at this
Right,
point.
I think I like voting
keep
on the
it clean.
amendment.
On the amendment.
And so, let's see if I've got this straight. We have a motion to amend the original motion, and the motion to amend was by Commissioner Anderson, second by Mayor Turnbow, to amend the original motion and remove revision 1, keeping of animals, from the proposed change to the Unified Development Code. Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend? And all those in favor, raise a hand, please. And I have, hold them up for a second. Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Meiske, Commissioner Fizer, and Mayor Turnbow. And opposed, Commissioner Urquia and Commissioner Faulkner. And now, Mr. Zer, we do not have 5. Where does this go? Does the motion die? The motion to amend?
Yeah, I would say your motion to amend has died.
It has failed for lack of a majority.
So we return to the original motion then,
Yeah.
correct?
And we're back to the original motion, and feel free to make another motion to amend. And if nobody else wants to stick their neck out, I will try, I'd move to amend the original motion to remove one part of revision 1, and that is under section A, number 2, chickens and similar fowl are permitted in A and RE and in the R1 district upon properties of at least 3 acres in size. So I'm moving simply to remove chickens and similar fowl from this proposed change, but that would leave the change including R1 3-acre minimum along with RE.
So number 2, chickens and fowls.
Can you state that again?
I'll try. Did I tangle it up?
Well, I think you're right, but I think the number 3 is probably kind of tied to number 2.
Okay, I don't see that, but I think we should probably have a second before we discuss. So, Commissioner Meiske, my motion was intended to remove only A2, chickens and similar fowl, from the proposed change and leave the rest of revision 1 in the case.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and so I heard a second from Commissioner Anderson. Now, we can discuss the proposed amendment. Did anybody else get?
So in essence, you just want to remove chicken and fowls from
Right.
from that altogether.
And in essence, here's my logic.
Size requirements stay the same.
It wasn't there before. I'm proposing to take it out. I still like the change to include R1 3-acre minimum along with RE. I think that's a good clarification to code.
If we don't identify chicken and fowl, is that going to leave us open to more people thinking that they can get chickens and fowls without?
We would allow currently, without any discussion this evening, chickens to be, and any fowl on A or RE. It's just not specified in the code. So that was one thing we wanted to specify.
Right.
Just for clarification, that those were the only districts chickens and fowl were allowed in. I just want the clarification that we still would allow it in anything over 3 acres.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Carteret and Commissioner Urquia. Any other questions, discussion about the motion or motion to amend before we vote on that? All right, well, let's see if we do better. So the motion to amend is to remove A2 from keeping of animals, simply removing the sentence about chickens and fowl permitted in A, RE, and R1 over 3 acres. Right. All those in favor of that motion to amend, raise a hand, please. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I have 3 in favor. Now let's see, that was Commissioners Faulkner, Anderson, and Meiske. All those opposed? And that would be Commissioners Fizer and Urquia and Mayor Turnbow, and so that motion to amend also dies. And
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Anderson.
love to hear commissioner comments, those who, as customary.
Voted against the motion to amend.
Please.
Commissioner
Sure,
Fizer.
I'm happy to share mine. Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Urquia, you can start.
I think their point of trying to clarify what is allowed and isn't allowed, I think is important. I think if we can spell it out, make it easier for our citizens to know that chickens and fowls, like other types of animals, can only be on certain size lots, will make it easier for new residents to know what is allowed and what is not allowed, and what size home they have to have in order to do that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fizer, any comments?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was thinking as well. It just kind of clarifies things, and it doesn't shut the door on, chickens in smaller areas at a later
Right.
date. It's just kind of, this is, like you said, sort of a
Clarification.
conservative starting point.
Sure.
So I think it's just clarifies things.
Thank you. Mayor Turnbow, any comments?
Mr. Chair, almost at every meeting we end, you comment on how great staff is, yet you're changing their recommendation. So they've done a lot of work. This is our 3rd iteration on this particular topic, and they have done a lot of work and research on it. I felt that the First Amendment to remove it for further consideration might have been a little bit better when we had a full body here to discuss and talk about it. But absent that, I think the work that the staff is doing, we should hail that and move forward.
Thank you very much. And so unless there's another motion to amend, I think I might be ready to call for a vote on the original motion, which was to accept case 17033 in its entirety and forward to City Council with a recommendation of approval. Is there any further discussion before we take a vote on that original motion? Okay. And seeing none, is everybody clear on the original motion? Case in its entirety, 17033, 26th Amendment to the UDC. And the motion was to accept staff proposed findings of fact and forward to City Council with recommendation of approval. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Squeaked by. Let's see. So we have 5 in favor, and that was basically everybody except Commissioner Anderson. Any opposed? Commissioner Anderson, and that leaves no abstentions. So the motion actually carries 5-1, and as is our tradition, Commissioner Anderson, we'd like to hear your thoughts for voting against the motion.
It's strictly based upon comments made from the public today from multiple factors there. So removing that, it kind of goes against that. So again, for myself and for my fellow commissioners, that we definitely have an opportunity to come back and revisit that as needed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, that concludes case 17033, and I hope the council appreciates.
Oh, trust me, this isn't the last you've heard.
Oh, no, I
Council
know.
will have a lively discussion as well.
I know. Mr. Zur is looking forward to reporting back to the commission after council. Okay, let's see. I'll get my wits together and we'll get back on the agenda. I've lost it somewhere here. We are probably about ready for City Council report. Mr. Zur?
Thank you, Chairman Faulkner. I'm happy to be able to provide a City Council report. It has been some time since we had the opportunity to meet, and as such, I have 3 City Council meetings to report from, including October 9th, October 23rd, and November 13th. I will run through a number of them in kind of a Cliff's Notes version, and if you've got questions, I'm happy to answer the same, and obviously would welcome input from Mayor Turnbow as well if there are any additional thoughts that he has on these council meetings. Councilman Holman has a tendency of providing a Cliff's Notes version at the conclusion of City Council meetings when individuals from the school district are in completing their requirements for school, and so I will try and provide a similar one for this one. At the October 9th, 2017 City Council meeting, the City Council voted to amend the City Code Section 105.060 regarding declaration of candidacy forms. That brings the code into compliance with new state statute on candidate qualifications. Thereafter, they approved a reimbursement agreement for the construction of Fox Ridge Drive, which allows for the completion of Fox Ridge Drive pursuant to the general obligation bonds approved by the citizens of Raymore previously. They also awarded a contract for security cameras at a public works building. They adopted the fiscal year 2018 budget, and they approved a sidewalk gap program, which fills in gaps in between undeveloped lots at this point for sidewalks. Finally, they redeemed the bonds for the 2008 series issuance, saving the city approximately $9,855. All of that occurred at the October 9th, 2017 City Council meeting. The October 23rd meeting, The City Council took up for consideration amendments to the city code as it related to water service, including the procedures, fees, and deposits submitted for water service under the city code, as well as similar language changes for service fees for sewers. City Council also took up an award of contract for Memorial Park improvement projects, awarding a contract for installation of a loop trail and other ADA compliance items in Memorial Park. Next, the City Council evaluated an award of a contract for the fiscal year 2017 streetlight installation project, which would install additional streetlights in Creekmore, Brookside, and Tiffany Manor. City Council then approved the capital improvement program, and you all would have had the opportunity to review and hear a report from City Manager Fearborn regarding the capital improvement program for the 2018-2022 years. That all occurred at the October 23rd, 2017 meeting of the City Council. At the November 13th, 2017 City Council meeting, the Council received a declaration of the November 7th, 2017 election results, approving 16 revisions to the charter as recommended by the Charter Review Commission. It awarded a project contract for painting on the interior of a public works facility. It awarded a contract for installation of holiday lights here at City Hall, as well as Centerview. Those are the items that occurred. Oh, and approved an extended contract with the city manager, or extended the contract with the city manager. That all occurred at the November 13th, 2017 City Council meeting. That is my City Council report, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about those items.
Thank you, Mr. Zur. Do you have any questions, Commissioners? All right. We'll go ahead to staff report, Mr. Cataret and Mr. Gress and so
Thank you,
forth.
sir. A couple of items. Start with the actual monthly report. I always like to talk about building activity. So it's been a very, very active construction year. Building permit activity, we've, through the month of October, we surpassed the total number of new dwelling units that we constructed in all of last year. We're at 216 as of October 31st. We've had a very active November. A lot of building activity, and you'll see some of those units, a lot of single family. We've also had some attached single family, which would fall under the point, and we've had some multifamily residential as well. The townhomes behind Timber Trails, which was quiet for a number of years, they just pulled a total of 40 permits to finish out the townhome development that's right behind the Walmart there. And I'm sure you've all seen some of the activity there, the lots in Remington Village, just north of Willow Wind, that sat vacant for a number of years. That same builder is building 5 fourplex townhome buildings there as well, but very active single-family development as well. If you look on the third page of the staff report, you'll see we have a total of 269 homes currently under construction, so very active. And then the number of lots available where somebody could walk in today to secure a permit, it's dropped down to 442. Those commissioners that have been on for a number of years, I mean, that number used to be over 1,300, almost 1,400. And it wasn't that long ago when you look at those numbers, continues to drop, even with the addition of lots in Creekmore and a few other subdivisions, with issuing 200, 210, 15 permits a year, that number just continues to drop. So, you know, at one point I was concerned because we had so many. Now it's starting to be almost the opposite, where a lot of those lots are tied up by builders at this point that own a number of lots waiting for construction. So the availability is starting to drop. Looking at our schedule, excuse me, for upcoming meetings, the next meeting of the commission at this time, December 5th. Which we currently do not have any applications scheduled for that meeting. We do have something scheduled for your December 19th meeting. It wasn't on your report, but the site plan has been submitted for the Hawk Ridge Park development. So any development of our parkland requires site plan by planning commission. So in that development, they're proposing the amphitheater on the east side of the lake, the trail around the lake, the ADA accessible docks. They're proposing 2 different restroom facilities, one on the north side of the lake, kind of serving where a playground area will be. There'll be also attached with the restrooms would be a pavilion for picnics, et cetera. On the south side of the lake would be another pavilion with restroom, more geared towards the amphitheater. Not all those projects would happen at the same time, but the site plan coming forward wanted to show you the master plan. Also includes a small parking lot on the south side of the lake. And then when you see the existing parking lot, it actually would be shifted a little further to the north and expanded in size. So a great plan, again, necessitating your review at this time. So some of those projects are supported by the general obligation bond and would be moving forward in 2018 for construction. Moving on, just looking at our schedule in the new year, we actually have a meeting scheduled for January 2nd, the day after the holiday being the first Tuesday in the month. No items currently on that agenda. But I do want to note the meeting that we would have on January 16th, which would be your second meeting in January. Because of the holidays, the way they fall on Monday evenings when our city council meets, we would have a need. January 15th is a holiday. Council is requesting to have that meeting, the meeting that they would have on that night on the 16th. They would have a need for business that evening. So with the commission's permission, would like to cancel the commission regular scheduled meeting for January 16th. If we have applications, we can work with the applicants to get to a different meeting, but we would like to cancel that meeting to allow the room to be available. There's just a need that evening to have a rescheduled council meeting. So with your support, we'd like to cancel the January 16th meeting. Keep the other meetings that I mentioned open for now. We know we'll have a meeting on December 19th, though.
So just a quick question about canceling January 16th. I'm certainly not opposed to it. However, that's a long way out. I don't know what kind of cases might come up, and I always hate for commission to be the ones holding up a developer because usually they've got money on the line. How feasible is it with Centerview now? How feasible would it be? It would certainly, you can't be in two places at once, I know, but how feasible would it be should something arise for Planning and Zoning Commission to meet elsewhere and let City Council have their chambers?
The difficulty would be the chambers are needed to record meetings for public hearings, et cetera. We certainly, if we had an item for a work session discussion by the commission, we could do it at Centerview, but we couldn't do any of our regular meetings or public hearings.
Well, that answers my question.
Not at this time, hopefully in the future, but not at this time.
Well, unless other commissioners have any objections, I think we'd be agreeable to canceling January 16th, 2018 P&Z meeting to make way for the City Council.
If we need to, we work with applicants all the time. If we need to move something up in the schedule to accommodate their needs, we always try to do that. Yeah, I agree. We don't ever want to delay an applicant if at all possible, but usually we can work with them to schedule it appropriately, make the time up somewhere if we needed to.
So the January 2nd, 2018 meeting, we are planning business as usual. Commissioners, please make an effort to be here. You know what happens when we get down too close to only having a quorum. And Mr. Carteret, to clarify, so December 5th, do we have any other activities lacking cases for that, or should we also just go ahead and plan to cancel the December 5th?
At this point, you probably should cancel it. If we had a topic, it would just be a discussion topic. We don't currently have that. And with the holiday of Thanksgiving,
coming up in
don't
the
have a lot of time
holidays,
to
people
plan.
have a lot of activities, usually earlier in the month. So, so our next meeting, to reiterate, our next meeting will be December 19th, 2017, and we will also plan to meet January 2nd of 2018. Right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that is it for staff. Oh, I'm sorry, one more item. No decision needs to be made tonight. I simply wanted to put this in the mind of commissioners. Again, every year there is a national planning conference that's available for training for staff and for commissioners. Each year we send one of the commissioners to the conference. It's added into the city budget, so the city pays for the cost of registration, travel, hotel, all of that, meals, et cetera. To cover that, there's good training sessions. A number of you have been to the planning meetings each year. But I'd like to get the date out for those just to start thinking about it. This year's conference is in New Orleans. It is from Saturday, April 21st to Tuesday, April 24th. And the registration would open up towards the new year, I believe early January. We always like to have registration done early, so you get the conference hotel and to make sure those arrangements can be made early. But I'll announce it again at our next meeting when we have a full commission, obviously. But we have in the budget for one commissioner to attend, so we would certainly hope that one of you would be willing to do that.
And I think we typically try to give the first shot at that to a commissioner who has not previously attended. However, I know commissioners who have attended in the past have found those very valuable, and so if a commissioner doesn't step up who has not previously attended, we certainly would like to take advantage of the opportunity for someone on the commission to go.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. That's all.
And I'll pass the staff comments over to Mr. Crass for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Construction season is rapidly coming to a close, but we have a number of projects underway or that have been recently completed. Probably one of the biggest projects we've completed this year is phase 1 of 155th Street. That was completed this week, which was the overlay of that road from Kentucky Road to Madison Street. So that was a successful project that we had a cooperative effort with the city of Kansas City. We are installing sidewalk on Municipal Circle to complete the pedestrian loop around there. Also completed parking on Maple Street on the north side of TB Hanna Station. My staff has been working on installing audible pedestrian signals along 58 Highway as part of our ongoing effort to support the Walk-Friendly Communities initiative that we have going. And also Google is returning to the city to start installing their fiber system. They will be starting on Monday. They're going to be moving fairly quickly, so we want folks to refer to Raymore, our website, raymore.com, for weekly updates or daily updates of where they're going to be working. And that concludes staff report.
Would you like to introduce our new city engineer?
Oh, thank you.
Please.
Gentleman right is Greg Rokos, who joined us about 6 weeks ago as the Assistant Director of Public Works for Engineering.
Thank you, and welcome aboard. Okay, we've kind of lost part of our public, but at this time I'll open the floor for discussion from the public on any topic that you would like to express.
Well, I wasn't planning on getting up again, but this gentleman.
If you wouldn't mind, just
Oh, I'm
keep an
sorry.
official name and address again. I'm fishing here. I think I know who you are.
Sorry, Kara Entz,
Yep.
212 West Heritage
Thank you,
Drive.
ma'am.
I wasn't going to get up and speak again, but, and I can't remember your name, I'm sorry. He was speaking about adding in additional streetlights in,
Mr. Crass.
I believe so,
Yeah, go
in a couple of the neighborhoods. And if there were some additional streetlights going in, I would encourage the city to take a look at some of the older neighborhoods in the area. Our street in particular, not the entire street, really just the end of Heritage, has 0 streetlights. In fact, it's so dark on our street at night that you can't even see the driveway to pull in at night, and anybody that comes and sees us at night makes the comment about how dark our street is. And so if that's the case, if we're looking at putting in more streetlights, I would just encourage the city to look at some of the older neighborhoods that maybe are lacking streetlights on portions of the streets. for just additional security. My husband, although he doesn't do this anymore, but he used to have to bring a machine home at night, like a large track hoe. Like if he worked really late at night, he would just bring it home, and he would put cones around it. But because our street's so dark, the trailer was actually hit 3 separate times. No damage to the machine or the trailer, but all 3 of those cars were totaled because they just slammed into the back of the trailer because they couldn't see it.
Not the same car all 3 times, I hope. Wow, that's not good.
Thank you.
Mr. Crass, have you got that address noted? And he'll probably get me later for giving this advice, but if the problem continues, you have 2 city councilmen representing your ward, and they would be happy to hear your problem, and will work diligently to solve it. Thank you. Other public that wishes to speak? Hello again.
Susan Dooley, 606 Condor.
Thank you.
3 points. I think there were 3. Number 1, Lee Summit is a community with a population of over 100,000.
Right.
So I just wanted to remind everybody of that regarding the statistics I pointed out earlier. Secondly, regarding Mr. Rodney Wagner, who's the manager of animal control, he said that the hardest part about having chickens in their town was getting it through city council. So I just wanted to let you know about that. And there was a 3rd point, and I don't remember it, but thank you.
I'll give you a second if it comes to you. Okay. Thank you. Oh.
Quick, I'll be quick.
That's
I have a
fine.
6-year-old who's getting very irritated that we're still here.
I haven't even started the timer on you, so you're good.
Okay. I just have a question.
Name and address for the record again, please.
Oh, Melody Wu, 801 South Franklin. So I understand that, obviously we're not proceeding with any hope of, getting backyard chickens right now. But what kind of time frame are we looking at that it would be readdressed?
Okay, so I think the motion that we passed this evening on case 17033
was specifying that it would be
clarifying that chickens are part of the animals permitted on 3 acres or greater.
Correct.
Mr. Cataret, if you would, and I know we have this in the case, but this goes ahead to City Council in January, am I correct?
That is correct, yes.
And then, so my question is, how soon after that, I mean, the City Council is just basically going to accept or reject that, correct?
Accept, reject, or modify.
So City Council can also modify?
Yes. City Council is City Council.
So we need to come back in January.
Well, so our timetable, and again, I hope I'm giving good advice, but the first reading of City Council is proposed for their January 8th meeting. The second reading is January 22nd.
Okay.
If you want to speak to City Council and make sure that they know your views firsthand, and of course, they'll read our testimony and our record from this evening, but I would advise go to that January 8th meeting, because the first reading by City Council is the next best place after Planning and Zoning Commission to make your point known.
Okay, I just want to make sure I
Sound right,
was
Mr.
on the right
Zip?
page.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have to get on the agenda?
Please clarify.
No,
I think no.
It would be a public hearing, just like we had this
Right.
evening.
Now, so again, a little bit more comment. As Mr. Cataret said, there will be a public hearing. You don't need to schedule in advance. With City Council, I believe their personal appearances are set up very similar to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we have a slot early in the agenda where a resident can request a personal appearance before the commission, or you could request a personal appearance before council, and that's pretty much on any topic.
List of grievances.
Well, yeah.
Right.
But I think probably what would be more appropriate here, since you've
Yes.
already sat through the case and public hearing this evening, would be simply to follow that case to the January 8th council meeting.
That's what I'll make sure I was correct.
good-
Thank you.
And it should be advertised again in the Raymore, well, in the Journal newspaper.
It will, it'll be advertised on the website
Right,
as well.
and on the
yes.
website as
Yes.
well. Okay, thank you. Any other public that wishes to speak to the commission this evening? And seeing none, I'll move ahead to commission member comment. And I think if you don't mind, Commissioner Meiske, I'll start at your end.
Well, thank you and welcome, my new commissioner, and I have no other comments.
That's fine. Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo that and welcome the new commissioner as well. Most meetings are just like this, so welcome aboard. And I also want to extend a thank you to the staff as well. You guys do an incredible job, so thank you.
Vice Chair Fizer.
I'd also like to say welcome. And I'd like to say it's really nice to see the public here. It's always good to get feedback because we don't always know what people are thinking. And I'm kind of ambivalent on the whole chicken thing. I kind of go back and forth, but it's good to hear the different perspectives because it does, make you think about it. So thank you for coming and thanks to staff.
Right. And thank you. Commissioner Urquilla, I would completely contradict Commissioner Anderson and say every one of our planning and zoning meetings is unique, just like every other one. The floor is yours.
Well, first, thank you guys for the warm welcome and for the opportunity to serve on the commission, and Mayor for the appointment. Hopefully I can learn quickly and add to the conversations as we go along. I will throw in that along with Kara on the street lights, that the older neighborhoods in Raymore, there is a lack. I know on my street as well, it gets pitch black at night. In fact, my car was stolen from my front yard because of how dark it was. So I would definitely echo that support in looking at the older neighborhoods where there is a lack of street lights. I have 6 young children, and at night, yeah, they can't go out and play in the backyard because they can't see their hand in front of their face. But again, thank you guys for the opportunity, and I look forward to serving on the commission.
Welcome aboard, Mayor Turnbow.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I want to welcome Mario to the commission. I've known him for several months now, and we've served on a couple of other committees together, and he's always got great insights, so I'm hoping he could bring that to this group as well. The only other thing that I would remind you of is if you haven't seen the art piece yet, I'm sure most of you have seen it. We just had a ribbon cutting on it the other day. Chet Redman, the artist who actually manufactured the seed pod there at Dean and 58, came out with his family, and Arts Commission cut the ribbon on it. He also got the Raymore sign up there in front of it as well, and it is now lighted. So I even haven't been by there at night to see it lit up, but I'm anxious to get by there and take a look at it. And then on December 1st, if anyone's interested, we're having the Mayor's Christmas tree lighting at TB Hanna Station. Starts at 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Mayor Turnbow for making an extremely good point earlier this evening, and that was that, yes, indeed, I do always, and it's not a habit so much, it's actually genuine appreciation. I always thank staff for your support. This commission could not do its work without all of the legwork and research and preparation that you put into it. And of course, thanks to Mr. Zur for a very tough job of trying to keep me straight, Mr. Crass, and I'll get the name here. Is it Rokos? Thank you. Glad to have you here as well. And again, Mayor Turnbow made a very good point. If I appreciate your work so much, why don't I pay attention to you? So I did. I voted for the motion to accept the case as presented. And I think it was indeed a lot of long, hard work on your part. We've certainly been through it a lot, and frankly, I'm looking forward to seeing how this works out, and again, it may be hopefully a step in a further direction. And unless anyone has any other comments, did you think of your third point? Oh, darn. Unless anyone has any further comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Let's see, that was motion by Mayor Turnbow
I'll second.
and a second by Commissioner Mieske. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. Only one, Leo. And 6-0, we are adjourned. 6-0-0.